What's the purpose of me holding all this pain deep inside me? It can cause an explosion.
Hi, my name is Michael White, founder of the MPG Music Production School, and in this video we're going to take a detailed look inside the WavesAbbey Road TG12345 channel strip.
My destiny's taking shape when I'm in the power.
Going back to the late 1960s with the expansion of multi-track recording and need for more mic inputs, Abbey Road commissioned EMI to design and build a console to meet these growing needs. The result was the TG12345. Originally commissioned in 1968, it was used on the Beatles' Abbey Road, as well as such classics as Pink Floyd's Dark Side of the Moon and Wish You Were Here. This was the first solid-state console built by EMI and designed to replace the valve-based Red Series consoles that have also been emulated by Waves as part of the Abbey Road collection. Let's start by taking an overview glance at the TG12345 channel strip, get into some of the individual settings, and then move on to some audio examples. To start off with, the plugin can be instantiated as a mono or stereo component. On the left-hand side, you see the input section in the top left, which defines the input gain coming into the channel strip plugin. Directly below is the compressor limiter section. In the center, we have the EQ section and a routing switch, which allows us to configure the signal flow between the compressor and EQ sections. On the right-hand side, we have the monitor output section. So let's start by taking a closer look inside the output section, and then we will move on to the individual settings of the dynamics and the EQ. To start off at the top, we have two VU meters for left and right with a dBFS meter in the center. The meters can be set to show input, output, or gain reduction, depending upon the switch setting here. The plugin itself can be operated in three basic modes. In duo mode, the left and right parameters are completely independent of each other. In stereo mode, the plugin parameters are linked together for left and right. And in MS mode, the left-hand side settings control the mid signal, while the right-hand side settings control the side signal. So let's start off here in stereo and work from there. Whatever you're setting here in the stereo component, the spread control allows you to increase or decrease the width of the stereo field, and we will demonstrate that in the audio demonstrations that come up in a little bit. The plugin can monitor the output in stereo, mono, which is a combination of the left and right, or we can also monitor the left or right signal individually. Directly below here we have output faders, which allow us to control the gain leaving the plugin. The original noise of the analog TG12345 console was also modeled by Waves and can be added in here from off all the way to 100. The original console came in the form of cassettes, and the cassettes were stereo cassette modules that could be removed for easy repair. And so Waves went about the process of modeling the left hand or channel 1 and channel 2, and each one has a slightly distinct coloration from the other. So you'll see this in the audio examples, how this can help you to shape the sound before you actually begin any processing. So that selection is directly here to the left and right of the faders. And there's also a drive control directly below that, and this provides the effect of overdriving the input electronics of the TG12345 channel strip. Directly below there we have a phase inversion switch. So let's move on over to the dynamic section and start from here. So at the input gain section, directly above the dynamics, we have 24 dB of gain or attenuation. The plugin actually, dynamic section, can operate out completely in compression or limiter mode. This is a VCA-based compressor, and it is always compressing. So when you engage the compressor, you will always have compression. The amount of, or range of the compression, is determined by the hold knob here. So at a 0 setting, all of the signal is being compressed or limited. As I increase this or move it clockwise towards the right, that decreases the range of gain reduction. And this is done with a static DC offset fed into the side chain of the VCA component. So this will also affect the overall gain that runs through the compressor section, but what it will do is it will limit the amount of signal that has gain reduction applied to it. So we'll start here with a setting of 0 and work our way from there. The recovery setting is a release control. At its number 1 setting, it provides 100 millisecond release time, 250 at the number 2 setting, 500 at the number 3 setting, 1 second, 2 seconds, or 5 seconds for settings 4, 5, and 6, respectively. So we can control the recovery settings here of the compression. Now, there is also an additional switch down at the bottom before we get to the mix control. And this is a high-pass filter, which is set to 85 cycles, and this feeds the side chain of the compressor. The idea being is that certain signals may over-trigger the compression based on the low end. So by filtering off the low end, you can have a bit more control over how the compressor reacts to the input signal. The mix control allows us to capture a blend of uncompressed signal and completely compressed signal. So this gives us the ability to apply excessive compression, if we like, and then find a blend of the natural unaffected or uncompressed signal with compressed signal. One thing that you need to understand about the signal flow of this mix control is that the EQ settings that you apply here will appear both in the uncompressed signal and in the compressed signal. So this way you are not setting a balance between EQ and non-EQ, only between compressed signal and uncompressed signal. So that's important to understand. On the right-hand side, or in the center section, we have the EQ section, and it can fundamentally be divided up into 2 separate sections. One is the EQ section itself, which is the treble control here and the bass control down at the bottom. The presence section was originally part of the bus cassette and was in the version 2 or Mark II version of the TG12345 console, replaced the treble EQ. So what Waves has done here is they've given you the best of both worlds by giving the ability to have the bell curve or parametric EQ here, as well as having the treble EQ and the bass EQ. So you get all 3. The routing switch up above allows us to define how that works in relationship to the compression. So the switch can be set to one of 3 settings. In its original setting, the EQ and presence controls, so the EQ being the treble and the bass, as well as the presence control, comes prior to the dynamic section. In the second setting here, the dynamics is prior to the EQ and presence control. And in the third setting, the EQ, which is the treble and bass control, is prior to the dynamic section, and the presence control here in the center is post-compression. So by default, it starts with the EQ pre-compression. Basically, once you set it up, it's very easy to toggle between the individual settings to see which one gives you the best responsiveness based on the input signal. The EQ section also has a bypass control that's been added in. Now, let's go over the individual sections because there are some unique features about the individual sections of the EQ. To start off, the treble EQ when you are boosting is different than when you are attenuating. So let's start with the boost signal. When you boost, it is a bell curve, a wide bell curve boost that is centered at 5 kilohertz. When you're attenuating, however, it becomes a shelving EQ with its starting point at 10 kilohertz. And it is a very broad Q. So what happens is if I'm attenuating by approximately, let's just say I'm attenuating by 6 dB, at 2.5 K, that would be half that amount, or 3 dB. So you could see that it's a very broad kind of EQ, the way that it's set up. The bass control is similar, except it's a shelving EQ whether you boost or attenuate. And the starting frequency is 100 cycles. However, when you boost or attenuate, the mid-curve point, so if we use the same example and we boost by 6 dB at 100, it'll be boosting at 500 cycles by 3 dB. So that gives you that mid-boost curve, is what they call it. And essentially what it is a very broad Q, or a very wide Q for a shelving EQ. built into the plugin, which is not a separate setting, is or built into the original console design, is also a bandpass filter that filters off frequencies below 20 hertz and also above 15K. So in spite of these filters that are placed particularly on the high end, you will find that there is no missing presence or brightness to the sound of the plug-in channel strip itself. So you will hear that in the audio examples very clearly. So it's a very soft curve in terms of the filtering on the top end. So this is an emulation of the exact original analog console design. So this is exactly what Waves has tried to emulate here. In the center section, we have the presence control. And this is a bell curve boost cut. And you have selected frequencies. Now, on the original console, these were stepped selections, as well as the gain settings were stepped selections. And what Waves has done here is they have given you the ability to not only click on the individual frequencies, if you like, but also to go anywhere in between. So this gives you far more flexibility with the vintage console that originally had just these stepped and very particular settings. So this gives you far more flexibility while preserving the sound of the original console. So that's also a very nice feature. Let's kind of move on into audio examples, and if there's anything that I've missed here in this basic overview of the plugin, we'll go about that and talk about that in the individual demonstrations. So one of the things I want to start off with here is just working with the kick drum, and let's just start with a kick drum signal and go about the process of working with the settings for getting a sound. So we'll start with the basics, and the fundamental starting point in terms of a process would be to start with the channel selection. So what I'll do here is I'll figure out which setting here sounds best for the kick drum. And so what I'll do here is I'll just increase the gain here so we can hear this a little more clearly. And this is the channel 1 setting. This is channel 2. Channel 1. Channel 2. So on certain sounds, it will be subtle. On other sounds, you will hear it more clearly. A lot of it is based on the frequency content and the nature of the material that's being fed in. So for this, let's start with channel 1. I can actually go about the process of doing the same thing with the snare to see if this is also So I think the channel 1 setting gives just a slight little bit more of a snap to it. And let's mix in the overhead mics here. So in this, what we have is a channel 1 by default on the left-hand side and channel 2 by default on the right-hand side. So when we're working here, we can also put them both to channel 2 or both to channel 1. Or do them in the original setting, which is channel 1 left, channel 2 right. Channel 1. Channel 1 and channel 2. So you can see that there's a slight variation and a little bit of a widening on the of this sound just by the slight variation between the coloration of the left channel and the right-hand channel. So let's move on, going back to the kick drum, and maybe what I'll do is I'll actually just mute some of this other stuff here, and let's move on to the basic equalization approach, and then we'll go into the compression. So with the boost and attenuation and cut here, if I wanted to add a little bit of low end here, I can do so right down here at the bottom, adding a little bit of. And because of the wide Q nature of the shelving EQ here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to dip a little bit at 500 cycles to kind of control some of that, to tighten it up. So you can really hear the openness of the sound and the detail come out. I can also add a little bit of treble if I want to add a little snap. And now let's move on to the compressor setting. So if we found that the input gain was a little bit high coming into the plugin, and obviously I can monitor that over here. I can apply some attenuation or gain if necessary coming into the plugin. But this is basically pretty good as is, so let's just move on directly to the compressor and limiter settings here. So the first thing I want to do is monitor the gain reduction here. And then I'm going to apply compression by hitting the compressor. So remember that this is compressing the entire audio signal. So in its 0 setting here with the hold control, what we really have is full compression across everything. And we can control the balance of this with the mix control down at the bottom. So the hold control that you see here is a static gain control. So unlike a hold control that you would find on a gate or an expander, which sets a certain time in milliseconds for the release, before the release cycle starts in a gate, this is very different from that. It's a static gain control. So what you'll hear is, and you'll see in the gain reduction meter over here, is how much the signal is being attenuated. So you really see here the excessive amount of compression. So as I swing this over, you'll notice that the gain goes down, okay, because it is bringing the overall level down through the VCA, but it also is limiting the amount of gain reduction that's being applied. So I can get a mix to find the right setting here for the amount of compression that I want to apply. I can also use the recovery setting to control the pumping and breathing. So you can see here how this stabilizes the sound, where the 100 millisecond setting, a recovery of number 1, makes it pump and breathe. If I feel like this is getting over-triggered by the low end, I can also apply the sidechain high-pass filter on the low frequencies. So just to be clear, this high-pass filter is only for the sidechain, so it's not audible in terms of affecting the dry signal. So this is one basic approach to working with this, and I'll show you a slightly varied approach for working with the snare drum. So with the snare drum, maybe I want this to pump and breathe a bit more. So what I'll do here is I'll start with the basic setting. I'll start with the EQ here for a second, and let's just, since we've already determined the channel select. So I'm going to add a little snap here up at the top. And I'm going to take away a little bit of this boxiness here, like around 800 cycles or so. Add a little bottom end. So you really can feel the openness of the sound. And now let's move on to the compression settings. So I'm going to set a compressor here. And I want this to pump and breathe a little bit more. But what I'm going to do here is I'm going to work with the side chain here for the low end. And then I'm going to back off and get a mix of compressed and uncompressed signal. So that's original signal. All compressed. And start it up again. And let me bypass the whole thing. So what we have here is a bit of added gain into the mix, and this would be typical when using the compressor or limiter with a 0 hold setting. You will have some additional gains. Let me just balance this off a little bit. And now mix this back in with the kick. So I like this a little bit more, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to get this to pump and breathe in a very similar way. And now add this in to the overhead mics. So from here, essentially what I have now is this approach that I can kind of define. It gives me some basic controls over how I blend the compressed and uncompressed signal, and you can really hear the amazing clarity and openness of the EQ. So let's just work with this, start with the compression settings, a little bit of EQ, and then I want to show you the differences between working with the different routing selections up here above. So this just sounds great right off. So I'm going to actually back off here on and let's try a different recovery time. Really like the balance of that. Really creates a lot of aliveness in the sound. And I'm going to have to back off my gain just a touch here. So I'm going to add again a little bit of presence here, like around at 5K here with the treble control. And I'm going to do a similar thing that I did with the snare, is to just tuck a little bit, maybe around 500. And so now I've added a little bit of EQ, and let's work with this in the context of the compression. So I will solo this up independent of the kick and the snare, close mics. And this is EQ prior to dynamics. This is dynamics prior to EQ. And this is the dynamics between the EQ and the presence control. So I will toggle between all three and let you listen. So of the three, I kind of like the EQ, dynamics, and the presence control afterwards. So let's just go with that here. And this is, again, something you can see all the flexibility in the ways that you can use the plugin itself to control that relationship between the EQ and how the compression is responding to it. I want to show you here in a bass channel strip setup here, where we can use the compression or limiting to help add some smoothness to the sound of the bass. So let's start with the original bass sound and select a channel. So I like the slight the clarity that comes out a bit more here in the channel 2 setting. So I want to start with that, and what I'm going to do is going to add a little bit of warmth here in on the low end, and let's start there and see what we can do with this. bring out a little bit of the mid-range in here. And then let's move on to the compressor limiter section. So I'm going to start with the limiter section here, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to have a slower recovery on the bass, and this should help to smooth out the sound of the bass a little bit. So let's start back here at the top. And at the top we have a slightly varied sound before he goes into the slapping section. So you can really hear the excessive limiting here. But with the slow recovery, it doesn't pump as much. And now what I'll use is the mix control to blend that more sustained sound with the more open, clear sound. And this is a great way to add warmth and depth into the sound. And it helps to balance the sonic change between the slapping section and the normally played section. Let's go through the routing configurations. Again, here I like the EQ dynamic presence selection here. It will vary just based off of what you've done and what settings that you've done. If you approached it in a different way, started with the compression first and then applied the EQ, you may find that a different setting sort of appears better, and then you can kind of play between the two of them and figure out the right combination. But it gives you a lot of flexibility, incredible amount of flexibility in terms of the control of your overall plugin. So this just shows you how you can help to bring some body into the sound of a bass. I'm going to start with the compressor section, and this actually can work very similarly to what we did with the bass, with a slower recovery to kind of smooth out the sound. And now if I want to add a little drive here before getting to EQ, so what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to add just a touch in here, just to kind of give it a little bit of an edge to the sound, as opposed to just getting into some heavy distortion. And that gives it just a little bit of an edge. It's without and with. And here I'll just add in a little bit of mid-range to bring that out a little bit. Tone down a little bit of the warmth, and go through the routing options. So I like this first setting here. One thing I didn't do, so I'm going to kind of step back here to stay consistent, is to select between the channel 1 and channel 2. So let's hear what that sounds like. And start it over. So I like the channel 1 setting a little bit better, at least for that section. And let's move on to the lead vocal.
There's a well-kept secret. I know many won't believe it. It makes your body much stronger.
So let's start by soloing up the vocal here. And let's start by going directly to our channel 1, channel 2 selection.
There's a well-kept secret. I know many won't believe it. It makes your body much stronger, helps your life last longer, better than any medication, cures any situation, frequencies and vibrations. That's the power of love. The power of love.
Just like the imaging a little bit better on the channel 2 setting for the vocal, so we'll start there. What I'm going to do here is I'm going to go to a 10 kilohertz boost and add just a little bit of air here up on the top. See if we can add a little bit of
There's
presence.
a well-kept secret. I know many won't believe it. It makes your body much stronger, helps your life last longer, better than any medication.
Really adds like a nice, beautiful open air to the sound. And let's mix in a little bit of compression here to kind of even out the vocal performance a little bit. I'm going to start with a medium recovery and do something similar to what we did with the bass and the guitar settings.
There's a well-kept secret. I know many won't believe it. It makes your body much stronger, helps your life last longer.
And then work with
Better
the
than any
mix setting.
medication, cures any situation, frequencies and vibrations. That's the power of love. The power of love.
Okay, so it looks like I'm clipping a little bit on the input here, so I'm just going to bring the gain down a touch, coming in, and let's listen to this.
There's a
in and out.
well-kept secret. I know many won't believe it. It makes your body much stronger, helps your life last longer, better than any medication, cures any situation, frequencies and vibrations. That's the power of love.
I'm going to bring in a little bit
The
more
power
mix
of
here and go through the
love.
different routing
The
selections.
power of love. The power of love. Oh, baby, the power of love. That's the power of love. The power of love. The power of love. Oh. What's the purpose of me holding all this pain deep inside me? It can cause an explosion, do some damage to my body. Once the mind is awakened, the universe is your playpen.
So I'm going to go with this routing selection here, which has the dynamics prior to the EQ and presence controls. And let's hear this in the context of the rest of the mix.
There's a well-kept secret. I know many won't believe it. It makes your body much stronger, helps your life last longer, better than any medication, cures any situation, frequencies and vibrations. That's the power of love. The power of love. The power of love. The power of love. Oh, baby, the power of love. That's the power of love. The power of love. The power of love. Oh. What's the purpose of me holding?
So let's do one final segment audio example here, and we're going to take a look inside the background vocals. And here I want to work a little bit with the spread control because we haven't included that in any of the demonstrations yet. So let's start by soloing this section up, and where we'll start is let's just start right with the spread control and see how this affects the signal. Oh, looks like we're already in. Okay, looks like we had some leftover settings here.
The power of love.
And so that is going to an almost full width setting here. So it's not a an overly exaggerated width control.
The power of love.
And that's more mono. So within the context of the mix, we can listen to this and find a setting that
Power of love. Power of love. Power of love. Oh, baby. Power of love.
So what that does is it gives us the ability to find the right placement in the stereo mix, just working within that, especially for something like the background vocals in this, where it's sort of an important hook kind of part. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to give it a little bit of a treble boost here, maybe a little bit of air way up there around 10 kilohertz. So remember, this is a 5 kilohertz bell curve, and so this should add quite a bit of air to the top of the sound. And I can add a touch of body there on the bottom end, just a touch. And now let's get right on to the compression settings here. And what I'm going to do here is also give this a little bit of body and movement. So where I'm going to start here is not with a full hold control, but we'll start in full compression mode and kind of work our way back and see if we can find like a good balance there of compressed signal that we can blend in to the original.
The power of love. The power of love.
So I'm going to slow down the recovery, make it a little smoother. And so let's listen to that.
The power of love.
So I like that smoother setting with the 500 millisecond recovery time. And now let's find a nice blend of dry and compressed signal.
The power of love. The power of love.
And go through the different dynamic EQ routing.
The power of love. The power of love.
And one more time.
The power of love.
Go more quickly through the other settings.
The power of love.
So I think I'm going to stay with the original setting here. As you kind of get used to the dynamic workflow of the plugin, you can see how powerful and how much you can really dig out in terms of getting cool tonal colorations and presence and warmth just by the way that you work with the limiter compressor and the routing section, along with the EQ and the configuration of everything and the spread control and the drive control. So there's quite a lot of flexibility here on the plugin. So let's listen to this in the context of the whole mix here.
Power of love. Power of love. Power of love. Oh, baby. Power of love. That's the power of love. The power of love. The power of love. Oh.
So here, I'm going to do just a quick A/B with all of the TG12345 channel strip plugins in and out, just to get a sense of what this is doing to the overall mix.
Power of love. Power of love. Power of love. Oh,
And
baby.
simply out.
Power of love. That's the power of love. The power of love. Power of love. Oh. What's the purpose of me holding all this pain deep inside me? It can cause an explosion, do some damage to my body. Once the mind is awakened, the universe is your playpen. My destiny's taking shape when I'm in the power of love. The power.
So you can see here how much openness and depth that's added in with the plugin. It's really an amazing emulation of a real classic console that was actually the same console that was used by the Beatles for their Abbey Road recording. So, and you can really feel the depth and body of this channel strip plugin. It's really amazing, to say the least. So one quick shout out I'd like to make for the performers on this. This production, Power of Love, was created by Cliff Hicks, and the vocal performance was by Gregory Vilfranc. And either of them can be reached at Trackheads, TRACKHEADZ at iCloud.com. So that's an email address that they can be reached at. The TG12345 Waves Abbey Road channel strip plugin. This is a classic console and absolutely one that should be part of your plugin collection.
What's the purpose of me holding all this pain deep inside me? It can cause an explosion, do some damage to my body. Once the mind